You are listening to the Nightline Sports Network, brought to you by Travis Dever and the Dever team, 386-690-1636.
Welcome to the AAC Report, only on the Nightline Sports Network. I'm Jeff Allen. Thank you so much for listening. Coming up, we'll hear from Will Turner of Bulls247.com as we check in on both the men's and women's basketball teams at South Florida. The women's team actually ranked number 13 in the country. Will is standing by in the virtual green room and will join us in just a moment. Meanwhile, big news in football as Scott Heupel is going to follow athletic director Danny White from UCF to Tennessee. Heupel formally announced as the new Volunteers head football coach today. The Knights have announced Scott Carr as the interim athletic director, and Randy Shannon will be the interim head football coach as the Knights will begin a national search for a new athletic director. Checking out men's basketball, and in the standings, the 6th-ranked Houston Cougars continue to lead things along with an 8-1 mark in conference, 13-1 overall. Memphis is now vaulted into second place, 5-2 in conference, 9-5 overall. Wichita State is 4th at 4-2, 8-4 overall, and SMU 4-3, 8-3 overall, and Tulsa in the 5th slot, 5-4 in conference, 8-6 overall. Player of the week in men's basketball, Quentin Grimes from the Houston Cougars. As they continue to keep on keeping on, he averaged 16.5 points, 8 rebounds, and 4 assists in a pair of wins last week. Had 18, 7, and 5 against Tulsa, and then had 15 points and 9 boards at Temple. And the freshman of the week, Musa Sase of Memphis. He averaged 13.5 points, 9.5 rebounds, and 2 blocks in a pair of Tiger wins last week. Had a double-double with 12 points and 10 rebounds against Wichita State, and had 15 and 9 at East Carolina. Coming up next, we'll talk to Will Turner of Bulls247.com about South Florida men's and women's basketball when the AAC report continues right after this.
Hey, this is Travis Dever, Kai's Real Estate, the Dever team, New Smyrna Beach. Your source for real estate and everything else, New Smyrna Beach. Proud sponsor of Nightline. Call me anytime at 386-690-1636. That's 386-690-1636. Let me show you my hometown, New Smyrna Beach, UCF's favorite beach. Go Knights and charge on.
An auto accident can change your life forever. At Chad Barr Law, we are raising the bar on what to expect from your personal injury attorney. Hi, I'm Chad Barr, and I want you to know that our entire team is dedicated to providing you with the representation you deserve in your greatest time of need. If you or a loved one have been injured in an auto accident, call 407-599-9036 for a free consultation or visit chadbarlaw.com. At Chad Barr Law, our clients come to us in need and leave as family. Offices, Altamont Springs.
Looking for more out of your Porsche? Look no further than Flat6Motorsports.com. They have the widest selection of aftermarket Porsche parts anywhere in the world. With over 85 product lines and in-depth expertise, Flat6Motorsports.com is your one-stop shop for any Porsche performance needs. Whether you're shopping for intakes, exhausts, suspension, or tuning, they have you covered. Flat6Motorsports.com is the premier Porsche aftermarket specialist. Check them out at Flat6Motorsports.com.
Time to do a college basketball check-in. We will check out USF, both the men's basketball team and the 13th-ranked women's basketball team. Joining us now to do that, Will Turner of Bulls247. Will, thank you so much for being back on the show.
Always appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, so let's start with the men's team first. And, so far 3-3 in conference, 7-5 on the season. But I guess the bigger story is scratching my head here. When's the last time they played?
Yeah, January 9th at East Carolina. They won 69-63 over the Pirates up in Greenville. And pretty much just as ECU went on a COVID pause themselves, USF ended up doing the same thing. They haven't, their last 5 games have been postponed, and there's a good chance that this February 3rd and February 6th games against Tulsa and SMU, a pretty big, western part of the conference road trip, could be postponed as well, depending upon their if their issues are solved at that point.
And what are you hearing as far as the ability to try to, make up these games? Time is starting to run short, and a lot of games are falling by the wayside.
Right. Yeah. There's 5 that need to be rescheduled. 1 against Houston, 1 against East Carolina, Wichita State, Temple, and Cincinnati as well. I haven't heard a ton regarding the rescheduling of those games, but, regardless of what the conference says, you're only going to have about 5 weeks to be able to do so. If you are able to get this February 3rd game played, let's say you go from February 3rd to USF's last scheduled game, which is March 6th against Tulane. That's about a month in order to get those games rescheduled. So, whether you have to wonder, there's going to be some weeks where USF is going to have to play three games in a week, whether it's a 3-game homestand. You could fit a game on a Monday, or you can go Monday, Wednesday, Sunday, or Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, something. You're going to have to play a game almost every other day if you want to get those 5 games rescheduled.
Yeah, it's almost like an NBA schedule there, that's for sure.
It really is. Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. So let's talk about the team a little bit before play halted, as we mentioned, 3-3 at conference, 7-5. Of course, last year, the start of the season, a big blow with Alexis Yetna not being able to go, and certainly he is back this season. Talk about what he has done so far in his return, and how the team had fared while they were still on the court.
Yeah, so having Alexis Yetna back is huge. I mean, he's not rebounding at the rate that he was rebounding 2 years ago when he won Conference Freshman of the Year. He's only averaging about 7.5 boards a game, which is still a pretty sizable total. A total that is second on the team only to Michael Durr, which is your 5-man, who you want ideally to be your highest rebounder. So he's done a solid job. He's really focused on stretching his game more towards the perimeter, stepping out to the 3-point line a little bit more than I've remembered in the past. He's 14 of 40 from behind the arc, so about 35%, shooting 48% on the year, which is the 3rd highest total, 2nd highest among starters, or highest among starters rather. So, he's being more efficient, in my opinion, and I really like kind of what he's doing and how he's not overextending himself on the court. I think there were times during his freshman year where he just looked a little bit tired at times, looked like he just might have been trying to do too much. But I think the way that he's fitting in the offense better this year is to be able to, be more of a traditional post player while also, being more of that stretch force. So he's kind of playing a little bit of a hybrid role, which is nice to see depending upon the matchup and what USF decides to go with.
Yeah, and David Collins leading the scoring column at 12 points per game. And of course, the senior leadership that he brings. Can you kind of talk about him a little bit?
Yeah, so DC has kind of had a weird year so far, especially in conference play. I believe he's, dealing with some sort of shoulder injury from what I understand, that has been kind of off and on from what I understand as well. So, he one game against UCF, he played really well. In that game on the 2nd of January where USF won on their home court. I believe most of his points came in the second half, if I remember correctly. But, you look at what he's done aside from that. The next, I want to say it was 2 games. The next game actually against Tulsa, he didn't score at all in 19 minutes. He was 0 of 1 from the field, 2 rebounds, an assist, 4 fouls and 3 turnovers in 19 minutes. And mind you, Tulsa's a really, really good defensive squad. So take it for what it's worth. Alexis Yetna, all the starters didn't play well against the Golden Hurricanes. So, take that for what it's worth. Rebounded against East Carolina, had 16 points in 35 minutes, 6 of 14 shooting, did a lot of his damage in the second half. It's just been one of those weird years for him where one night he looks unstoppable and looks like, one of the best guards in the country. And then the next night he kind of falls off and nobody knows where to find him.
And as far as the rest of the squad, who are the guys that, the people want to keep an eye on when South Florida does get back on the court again,
right?
And who are the guys the opposition want to keep an eye on?
Right. So I think Caleb Murphy is a guy that's really it's hard to say underrated for a top 100 recruit out of high school, but in the grand scheme of things, I think that Caleb Murphy is really underrated. A top 100 recruit, 4-star recruit out of Loganville, Georgia, out of Grayson High School up there, which had three high Division I recruits that came out the same class last year, which included Caleb Murphy. So I really like what he does at the point guard spot. Really took over as a starter. Xavier Castaneda was dealing with a groin injury to start the season. Murphy got a couple of starts early on in the year to relieve him. And he's played well, averaging 10.1 points per game, a 41% shooter, 42 assists. The problem with what Caleb does, and this is what's going to, correct itself with time once he gets a little bit more experience, it's just a turnover issue. He's got 35 turnovers on the year, and a 42 to 35 assist to turnover ratio is almost pretty close to that 1-to-1 ratio, and something that you don't necessarily want to have out of your starting point guard. And that was a problem that USF had last year with LaQuincy Rideau, so it's one of those things where it's kind of a byproduct of USF's offense, very, run to the basket, and if there's a turnover, it's a turnover, and the turnovers are kind of built into that offense. And USF has always had the last 3-4 years under Brian Gregory high turnover totals as a result. But the one thing that I really like about Caleb Murphy is his end-to-end speed. He's probably one of the quickest players in the conference. A lot of quick twitch muscle that gets him up and down the court pretty quickly. Can go end to end, pull a rebound down, and then 2 seconds later he's down on the other end of the court finishing a layup. So I like him a lot. I think Justin Brown is another player that's kind of been off and on a little bit to start the year. 38.5% 3-point shooter, which is his bread and butter, which is kind of about what he has had the last couple of years. Michael Durr has probably made the biggest improvement out of any USF player at the center position over his 3 years of being in the program. Consistently has gotten to be a better rebounder, a better scorer, just a better center. He's getting his little baby hook down around the rim, can step out to the 3-point range even and knock down a 3-pointer every now and again. So I really like what he did. We good?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Just want to make sure. And then Jameer Chaplin is another guy that I really like that's really improved this year. He's not going to blow you away in the scoring department, 5.6 a game in 12 games. But he is known to have those kind of games where he's just on fire. He had 16 against Tulsa when Collins, Yetna, JB and Michael Durr weren't scoring. He had 16 against Tulsa in 26 minutes on 6-9 shooting. He's another, quick twitch type of guy that's very quick up and down the court, that's really, improved at the guard spot. Very similar game to Darren Green over UCF, just a little bit more of an inside presence and not as strong of a 3-point shooter.
And let's talk a little bit about Coach Brian Gregory. As a UCF guy, when I saw they're hiring Brian Gregory, I'm like, crap, they're going to be good in basketball again.
Yeah.
You talk about the job he's done, and also, what kind of how he's had to deal with these challenges of like everybody else has had to deal with COVID 2020 and 2021.
Yeah, Brian Gregory's had he's had challenges pretty much every year, a big challenge almost every year that he's been head coach. First year was trying to rebuild a roster. Second year was, his second year was probably his least least amount of problems. He had a couple lineup changes, a couple of guys that, were underperforming, what have you, that happens on every team. But that second year when they won the CBI championship was probably the one year that he didn't have a major problem to deal with. You look at year 3, the Alexis Yetna injury and having to play guys that, Justin Brown, who's your normal small forward, was playing center against East Carolina in February last year. So played with an extremely small lineup last year. So, that was kind of his big hurdle to climb last year. You go 14-17 overall, 8th, 9th, kind of bottom half of the conference in year 3. And then in year 4, obviously, is the COVID issues and having, players out. I think they've done a solid job this year, kind of managing their COVID issues before all of this, before the 5-game shutdown. They were, there weren't a whole lot of players that were out. There was no true worries about getting, guys, making sure the guys were ready to go. There was a false positive issue at one point that was cleared up pretty quickly around the end of December and early January that they quelled really quick. But aside from that, I think they've done a pretty solid job. Brian Gregory on the court, they've made improvements every year. Right now, 7-5, 3-3 probably isn't what you want out of this basketball team. But considering that you only had a 6-game non-conference schedule to prepare for the conference schedule, hurts the team a little bit, not as much time to prepare against the competition that they wanted to prepare against. So, they've made some good improvements. Like I said, Michael Durr, in terms of player development, has been a really nice player to see. Jameer Chaplin in player development has been another nice player to see. And then you look at the recruiting side, they brought in Caleb Murphy last year, who was the second highest rated signee according to 24/7 Sports recruiting rankings last year. And they bring in another guy this year by the name of Trey Moss, a 6'3" point guard from Windermere High School, which is over in the UCF neck of the woods. So they went and grabbed him last year, or they've got him this cycle rather. He held offers from Atlanta, Florida Gulf Coast, UMass, Santa Clara, Stetson, and the big one was Texas A&M. So grabbing a guy like Trey Moss out of Windermere and over a school like Texas A&M is pretty solid in the recruiting. So they're getting there. They have looked stagnant at times on the court, against the zone especially. They've struggled, especially offensively. The turnovers are still a problem. The free throw shooting percentage is still the problem. Those late game situations where they're trying to close out ball games is still kind of a problem. But, they're getting there. But it's year 4. So at the same time, you're getting better in some aspects, but there's some parts of this team, like the free throw shooting, that should have been corrected a year or two ago that still have not. So, mostly positive things, but there are still some glaring aspects of the Brian Gregory tenure that need to be addressed quickly.
Yeah. Let's switch over to the women's side. So South Florida is, you look at going into this year, UConn goes back to the Big East. So now it's up for grabs for everybody else now, because right. UConn went undefeated their entire run in the American. And of course, South Florida has certainly stepped right up to the plate to do that. 10-1 on the season, 7-0 in conference, 1 game in front of UCF, and riding a 9-game winning streak, but also now affected by the postponements of COVID. Nationally ranked. Yep. That'll be a lot of pride talking about South Florida women's basketball.
Yeah, they've been really good. They, their only loss was a loss to number 4 Baylor, which was a 67-62 game, which they were in pretty much until the fourth quarter. Queen Egbo, who's one of the premier post players in the country, had a fantastic second half. USF, I believe, was tied at the half or down by 1, and they were right in it with Baylor a year ago, right down to the wire with the Bears out in Waco last year. So it was really encouraging to see them fight with Baylor, even though they lost by 5. But then a couple days later, you had the opportunity to go up against a Mississippi State team that was no slouch either. The number 6 team in the country at that point in time. USF is down. I believe they were down 19-11 after the first quarter. They go on a 20. They outscore the Bulldogs 25-12 in the second. Fight with them pretty much through the third. They have a lead after the third. Mississippi State comes back, ties the game, and USF closes it out in overtime to win 67-63, which was, the largest upset in terms of, beating a number 6 team or beating a top 10 team. USF had never done that before. So huge for them in that regard. So, and then you take a look at kind of the rest of their schedule. They've beaten everybody that they've needed to beat. Cincinnati was a top 4 team last year, a conference finalist last year, if I remember correctly, beat them by 12 in Cincinnati. They beat East Carolina, who looked like a potential conference dark horse. They went on the road at Tulane, which was their last game on January the 13th, a Tulane team that was at the top of the conference, undefeated at that point in time, and USF beat them by 19. So they've beaten everybody that they've needed to beat. It'll be interesting to see what happens after this shutdown, after all these postponements of games, especially since, now 2 teams have dropped out of the women's standings in SMU and Memphis. Memphis hasn't opted out yet, but the one game against Memphis on the schedule was canceled on January 17th, and it appears that the other one has been taken on, USF played them to start conference play. So, having that second Memphis game out of the way canceled helps USF in terms of the standings, but it'll just be interesting to see how they, kind of bounce back after this wave of 4 straight postponed now.
Yeah, and you look at that, and they still got UCF on the schedule twice, and they have UCF as the last game of the season. Could potentially be for all the marbles there.
Yeah, and it's kind of really cool to see that the top two teams in the women's basketball standings are right next to each other, right up by 4. So, UCF have given the USF women some trouble the last couple of years. Obviously, sweeping both games last year and in the 2018-19 season. So, the Knights have a 4-game winning streak against USF, and I think that's going to be a big point of emphasis for Jose Fernandez and his staff, saying, hey, this is supposed to be the premier program of this university. We can't lose to our rival a 5th straight time. So, yeah, you mentioned USF sitting at 7-0, UCF sitting at 6-1, right up against each other. USF 10-1 overall, UCF 8-2. That's going to be a big time matchup for those 2 squads, and one that I know USF is going to be really motivated for with that 4-game losing streak to try and snap.
And tell us who are the stars on this women's basketball team?
Well, there's a lot of them, Jeff. This team, the thing that I really like about the women's team at USF is that it is so balanced. You could get a quality night from any of the 5. Really from anybody up and down their lineup. I was going to say 5 starters, but it goes deeper than that. There's 4 players right now that are averaging over 9.5 points or more. Alina Chineke, Sydney Harvey, Maria Alvarez, Betty Manunga, and Eliza Pinzon. Those 5 players are really solid players. Elena Chineke's coming off a freshman of the year award last year, and she's right up there averaging 12 points a game to lead USF right now. So, and she's one of those players that, again, can go off at any point in time. She had 31 points against Wichita State and owned the court, 11 of 16 from the field, 5 of 8 from the 3-point line. Sydney Harvey's another one. She hasn't really had one of those signature nights that the other players have had, but she did have 21 points in a win over Cincinnati on the road in 26 minutes with 5 3-point makes. Maria Alvarez is right behind her. She had a special night against Houston, 23 points in 20 minutes with 6 makes behind the arc. Betty Manunga is a double-double machine. She had, her special night was the 23 points, 21 rebounds against East Carolina. So, when you look at Elisa Pinzan, who is leading the conference in assists right now, she's had 11 and 1 against Cincinnati and 14 against Houston. She had 22 points against Tulane. So this USF lineup is extremely, extremely deep. And that's without mentioning a player like Christina Bravinsova, who's, a player that played a huge role last year, scored a lot of points last year, was among the top 5 in scoring last year, but it's only scoring 5.9 per game. So she's taken a little bit of a backseat, but she still can score. She had 18 against Jacksonville to start the season. So it's so deep, Jeff. This USF starting lineup, their bench is really deep. They can really play a lot of different rotations and still look good. And the best part about it is, they're not overextending themselves. They can get into their bench, 5, 6, even 7 players deep because of just how well they've recruited and how much this team has developed over the last 2 or 3 seasons.
Yeah, so, when you have depth to work with, this is kind of like for the opposition, pick your poison, right?
Right.
You have to try to, shut down one thing, but they've got enough talent to work the other way around that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it's one of those things where everybody can seem to have a special night at some point. And, you never know who it's going to be. So walking up to the game, I'm always thinking in my head, I'm like, okay, who do you think is going to have the night tonight? Whose night is it going to be? And a lot of it, a lot of the success stories that you see come behind the 3-point line. USF is shooting 32% from deep. They have 91 makes on the year through 11 games. So that's about 9 per game, which, if you're making 9 threes a game and shooting at a 32% clip from behind the arc, you're going to be a pretty successful basketball team, shooting almost 40% from the floor as a whole. Maria Alvarez has a 45.8% from behind the arc. She's knocking down her shots at almost a 50% clip, which is incredible. It's wild to think about, how every time she puts a shot up, you have a 50-50 shot of it going in. Sydney Harvey has 18 makes. Chineke has 16, Elisa Pinzan has 15, and then Bravinsova has 11. And then if you don't make the 3-point shot, Betty Manunga is more than likely there for the offensive rebound. USF has always been one of the top teams in the country, top 10 in the country in rebounding. But where they excel is the offensive boards. That was how they beat Mississippi State. You go back to that game, you look at the offensive rebounding total. Mississippi State kind of said before the game, we need to contain them on the offensive glass. USF, I believe, had 23 offensive rebounds in that game against the Bulldogs. You go back to the Baylor game, and USF had 14 offensive rebounds in that game. So offensive rebounding is such a huge part of USF's game because it creates those second, third, fourth chance opportunities that really can almost break the will of opposing teams. And I've seen that's kind of their calling card is they'll hang around with the team for the first half, maybe the first three quarters, and then they'll just pull away in the fourth because it feels like they're almost breaking other teams' will on the court.
And sometimes chemistry is an overused word in sports, but, when teams are winning, and the ability to, quote unquote, share the load because, they have this kind of talent, there's a lot of sharing and a lot of deferring that I think has to go along for that to happen. Yeah.
And, you want to talk about the assist totals, too. That's one area that I don't think gets talked about enough. You look at kind of how this team is. They have 191 assists on the year. They're I believe they have 17.4 assists per game on, if I can do the math here,
I was told there'd be no math.
Well, I got to make sure I have my numbers right for you. Because the number is kind of crazy. So they have 17. Let me find the number again. So they have 17.4 assists per game on 24.5 made baskets per game. So that's nearly 75% of the shots you make are being assisted, whether it's someone coming off of a ball screen to open a 3-point opportunity, whether it's a throw into the post, whether, however, they're getting it done. They're finding the open teammate, making the extra pass. And again, if you want to talk about the whole breaking down opponents' teams' will, a team, only the elite teams are going to be able to rotate. If you're in man-to-man coverage, the only elite teams are going to be able to rotate around for so long. They're going to leave an open shooter open, every now and again. And that's where USF really excels. They get a lot of good looks, a lot of open looks, and they don't miss them. So, one of the biggest things for them is they're unselfish. There's a lot of good chemistry on the team. And it may be a little bit of a cliche. And if you look at it's really cool to see as well with the amount of international flavor on USF's roster. There's 10, 11 different countries represented everywhere from the Czech Republic to Croatia to Spain to Portugal to, Puerto Rico. There's a lot of different places represented, 3 different continents represented between Africa, Europe and North America with the United States. So, there's a lot of international flavor, and I think that helps a lot because of the fact that, most of these players are away from their families. So who do they have to lean on? Their basketball family within their own, within their own walls. So it's really cool to see just the amount of different backgrounds on the team, the amount of different personalities on the team, and just to see how they all, gel together really well on the basketball court.
Yeah, and your math also tells me that's not a lot of one-on-one action going on there. They are definitely sharing the ball.
Right. Yeah. When 75% of your made baskets are, assisted on, and we're talking, there are some games where it's like 24 of 25 were assisted on. It's kind of a rare night for them to see them to see people in one-on-one matchups. But if it is a one-on-one matchup, for example, Elena Chineke's 30-point game against Wichita State, or 30-point game. I already said it once. I can't remember now that it's off my screen. But a lot of her points in that game came off of one-on-one situations. Would come off of Wichita State. Yeah, so she would come off of a ball screen, and just get a pass from somebody and put it in. Or she'd come off of a ball screen herself, put her in the right position, and she'd pull up and make the jumper herself. So, a lot of what she did that night was one-on-one from the looks of things. But, she wouldn't have been able to have the 31-point night if it wasn't for, Maria Alvarez, on the right wing, dishing it to her on the other side of the court, or Betty Manunga, giving it to her from in the post, to the elbow. So there's a lot of good passing and assist totals that come out of what they do night in and night out.
Well, across the board, for all the, the jokes about, UConn bringing the conference down, it is a whole different world without them in women's hoops. That's for sure. Sure.
Yeah. And it's, you look at everything and you look at kind of the parity of this league. We talk about it a lot with the men. How there's a lot of parity, how there's a lot of teams, especially last year, you looked at outside of, Houston and Tulsa, it was kind of Houston, Tulsa, and everybody else. And even, teams like Tulane that was bad the year before was in a lot of ball games. Even a team like East Carolina was in a lot of ball games. So there's a lot of competitive and parity within the league. You look at the league standings right now. You've got USF at 7-0, UCF a game behind them, Temple a game behind them, Tulane a game behind them, Houston sitting at 5-4, You really look at 1 through 5 through the conference standings. You go even past then and look at East Carolina and Tulsa. You've really got a 1 through 6, 1 through 7 that's really competitive, that could really, let's say we get into February with a lot of postponed games that are going to have to be scheduled, teams on short rest. You never know what's going to happen. So I think there's a lot of good parity, because what if USF comes out of this, 4-game postponement a little flat? They lose a game or two. Now you've got a question where, well, if UCF wins out, do they stay at the top? Well, if UCF loses a game and then you've got, and let's say Temple, decides to go on a winning streak. Now you've got 3 teams that could have 2 losses coming into the last 2 or 3 weeks of the season. So it's going to be really fun to see how this conference plays out. And, everybody talked about how UConn kind of dragged it out. I think it makes for a much more of a fun league, because you don't know who's going to win the league, right? At the beginning of the year, you're like, okay, well, UConn's going to win the whole thing. But now you go into the season and you're like, okay, let's, in the coaches poll, okay, we can maybe spread these first place votes out a little bit, because there's, 2 or 3 different teams that have a chance to win.
All right. Well, Will, please promote your work and your social media and anything else you want to talk about.
Yeah, so my personal Twitter is at WTurner247. Working as the publisher of Bulls 24/7 for about a year and a half now. Covered USF for 3 seasons now. High school football in the Bay Area for 5 seasons. So work a lot of recruiting across the Tampa Bay area and all that good stuff. So the business Twitter is at Bulls 24/7. The site is bulls247.com, an affiliate of the 24/7 Sports Network. And yeah, that's about it. That's all I've got.
All right. Will Turner, Bulls 24/7. Thanks so much for being on with us again.
I always appreciate you having me on, Jeff.
And as we mentioned in the women's basketball standings, South Florida leading the way, 7-0 in conference, 10-1 overall on this early Wednesday taping. UCF 6-1 in conference, 8-2 overall. Temple 5-2 in conference, 5-5 overall. Tulane at 4-3, 8-4 overall, and Houston in the 5th slot, 5-4, 8-5 overall. Player of the week in women's basketball, Dulcie Fangham Mingiadu, and forgive me if I am not pronouncing that correctly. She was a big force for Memphis in a 2-0 conference week, 13.5 points, and a conference high 14 rebounds, 2.5 block shots per game in those 2 contests. Had 17, 14, along with 4 blocks and 2 steals in a road win in Cincinnati. Then followed up with 10 points, 14 boards, a couple of assists, and a win over Tulsa. She is the American leader with 6 double-doubles, tied for the conference lead with 11.5 rebounds per game this season. And that ranks in the national top 25 in both categories. The freshman of the week, Kariya Beck of Memphis, earned her first career weekly conference honor. Had 2 big performances last week, 12 points, 4 rebounds per contest, while shooting 72% from the floor in only 47 minutes. She registered 8 points, 2 rebounds in Cincinnati, and then had a 16-point, 5 of 6 shooting performance, along with 6 boards and 2 steals against Tulsa on January 23rd. Back with more news from soccer, volleyball, and more when the AAC report comes back right after this.
I need to talk to you about something very near and dear to my heart. It's Tijuana Flat's new fajita tacos, available for a limited time. Grilled chicken or steak with fajita peppers and onions, garlic lime sauce, and guajillo chili salsa. Topped with cheddar jack cheese, crisp iceberg lettuce, and fresh pico on warm flour tortillas served with chips and salsa. We're talking good vibes and even better flavors from a whole nother plane of deliciousness. Available for a limited time either in-store or through their app and website for delivery or pickup. These aren't just fajitas. They're something better. True enlightenment. Fajita tacos. Available for a limited time only at your neighborhood Tijuana Flats. Hello, Night Nation. This is Andrew Fagley reminding you to tune in every Tuesday night, 9 to 10 p.m. on WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580, plus the WDBO app for Nightline at Night. brought to you by Chad Bar Law. We'll be taking your calls and your texts reacting to the previous week's UCF sports action, and you never know who will show up. Once again, that's Nightline at Night, every Tuesday, 9 to 10 p.m. on WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580, plus the WDBO app. Go Knights and charge on.
Welcome. This is a promo for the Take a Left at Albuquerque podcast, new to the Nightline Sports Network. You should listen to it. I say things like this. We need to stop blaming Jerry because we would do the exact same thing if we owned the Dallas freaking Cowboys. Do you know how much fun it is to own the Dallas Cowboys? My guests will say things sometimes like this.
It's the Lord of the Flies thing that happens when they don't understand that things are wrong, spoiler alert, until Piggy dies.
Lord of the Flies has been out for like 100 years. I don't even know.
Sorry to everyone at home who I spoiled the book for. A book's been out for like 90 years or something.
And sometimes, rarely though, I'll say really stupid things like this. If they don't make it out of the West and the Raptors get to the finals, I will go on either this show or whoever's show and say that Kawhi Leonard is overrated because I have too much evidence of it. New episodes drop every Friday with me and some of my good friends right here on the Nightline Sports Network.
Memphis has been named the favorite in the American Athletic Conference Women's Soccer Preseason Coaches Poll. They earned 7 out of 9 first-place votes, earning a total of 63 points. UCF had 1 first-place vote, picked second with 52 points, 1 point ahead of defending tournament champion USF. SMU earned the final first-place vote and was selected fourth with 48 points, followed by Cincinnati, Houston, East Carolina, Temple, and Tulsa. The preseason Offensive Player of the Year, Clarissa Laracy of Memphis. The Defensive Player of the Year, Cheyenne Dennis of USF. And Goalkeeper of the Year, Elizabeth Moberg from Memphis. And the preseason all-conference team looks like this. Ellie Moreno of UCF, along with her teammate Kristen Scott. Ashley Barron of Cincinnati with her teammate Sophie Gorman, Kim Sanford of ECU, Jasmine Grant from Houston, Tanya Boychuk of Memphis, Maya Jones, her teammate from the Tigers, along with Laracy, and Moberg, Cheyenne Dennis, as we mentioned, from South Florida, Cindy Nacello from South Florida, and Selenia Torres of SMU. And volleyball, the Offensive Player of the Week, Nicole Anderson of Wichita State, got those honors. As the Shockers got off to a 3-0 start, the sophomore outside hitter ranked in the conference top 10 in points per set, 3.9, kills per set, 3.36, and digs per set, 3.36, and a hitting percentage of .284. Turned to double-doubles against South Dakota on January 22nd and Missouri State on January 24th. And the Defensive Player of the Week, Michaela Heidelberg of Tulane. Key member in their 2-0 opening weekend is the defensive anchor, averaging 5.5 digs per set to rank second in the American and tied for 12th in the conference with 0.25 service aces per set. Turning to tennis, the American Athletic Conference Women's Tennis Player of the Week is Shura Pope of Tulsa. Went 4-0 in singles, 3-1 in doubles play as they got to a 3-1 start in the dual match season. And the Men's Tennis Player of the Week, Chase Ferguson from South Florida. The Melbourne Australian went 2-1 in both singles and doubles play to lead the Bulls to a pair of wins in their first 3 dual matches of this season. Turning to swimming, the Women's Swimmer of the Week is Alex Stevens of SMU. Had a pair of strong performances against number 13 Texas A&M and Conference O Tulane. Had 4 individual victories while swimming with 3 winning relay lineups. Had the 5th fastest 50 freestyle at 23:50 and the 6th fastest 100 style at 59.9. Women's Diver of the Week is Taylor Olhauser of SMU. And she scored 305.48 points off the 1-meter board to claim an event win and NCAA zone qualifying score before logging 325.43 points in the 3-meter event for a second event win and NCAA zone score. And that's going to do it for this week's show. As always, I invite you to follow me on Twitter at JeffAllen_88 and the Nightline Sports Network at UCF_Nightline. This has been the AAC Report. only on the Nightline Sports Network. I'm Jeff Allen. Thanks so much for listening.